Thank you. Roll call, please.
Leo Bisucci.
Here.
Jason Keogh.
Here.
Rick Knotts is excused. Ashley Pasquale.
Here.
Robert Smith.
Here.
Chuck Vaughn is excused. Scott Welty.
Here.
Mark Zeef.
Here.
And Samantha Zilberman.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay, it's time for the call to the public. Did you wish to speak, Mary? Or anyone? Okay. Thank you. Sure. Okay, approval of the April 23rd meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I motion to approve the April 23rd minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Keene.
Thank you. All our summer programs are currently underway, including our Sunshine Camp, Camp I Wanna Go, Youth Adventure Camp, swim lessons, the Pirate Summer Swim League, and the Junior Lifeguard programs. I'd like to thank Western Welcome Week, who donated $2,000 towards our recreation scholarships. I'd also like to thank LHC Properties. They're donating cookies and goodie bags to help celebrate the birthdays of our camp participants that have birthdays in the summer that don't get to celebrate during school time. So appreciate that, their generosity. 3rd through 7th grade basketball clinic began tonight and will run through July 19th. On Thursday, June 21st, our swim lessons ran in conjunction with the world's largest swim lesson. The world's largest swim lesson is a promotional event created by the World Water Park Association in 2010. This event serves as a platform to help build awareness and fundamental importance of teaching children to swim to help prevent drownings. Our instructors gave parents tips that they have learned through being a water safety instructor, as well as showed all the parents how to fit their child with a life vest properly. In 2017, 41,068 children and adults participated in the world's largest swim lesson across 26 different countries. The hope is that in 2018, this event will spread the message to even more participants. Lake Havasu City was able to add 56 participants and their parents to the 2018 total. Open swim is currently being offered 7 days a week, Sunday through Friday from 12 to 4, and Saturday from 12 to 5. The aquatic center, the pool will be open on July 4th from 12 to 4 for an open swim. So it's a little bit of an addition that we're going to try out for the holiday, and in hopes that we get a lot of people there during the daytime before the fireworks start. The junior lifeguard program, they will head down to Phoenix to shadow the guards at Wet and Wild on July 25th. And we have a pirate party on July 25th for ages 5 to 10 at the Aquatic Center gym from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. Pre-registration is required. There will be a blood drive on July 11th and 12th in the Relics and Rods Hall. And with the city manager's approval and Ken Porosky's hard work out there, work has started for the loading and unloading zones for the kayak at London Bridge Beach. So just a little update on that. And that concludes my report.
It's very cool to hear that that has moved along so quickly. So, great work. Questions for Mr. Keene? Am I being picked up? Questions? Discussion? Do you have information on the summer camps registration? If there are waiting lists, I would imagine there were.
They're kind of dwindling down. I think last time we checked, there was 1 or 2 at a school, at each of the schools. So they're pretty much dwindling down to be able to accommodate those, or parents have found other arrangements.
Oh, okay. Okay, so not because children are leaving the camps for some reason?
Correct.
Or they are?
Some do. Some of them let us know. Some don't if they only needed camp for a few weeks. But for the majority, they will let us know if they're taking the rest of the summer to go visit grandma, because that'll allow us to be able to enter another participant in the camp.
Okay. And if this doesn't fall under staff report, then you don't have to answer. But
No,
is Miss Silberman, is she staying on as a board member, or
She did not submit her packet for next
Okay.
year, so we'll be
So we
looking
need
for a
another
new
high school
student
student?
member. Yes.
Okay. Did anyone have questions? Okay, thank you. So we'll move into our public hearings, and the first is on Proposition 409, and City Manager Knudsen.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for having me this evening. I was asked to come and present some information about Prop 409. So I'll share some information with you and encourage you to stop me throughout the presentation if you have questions or want to know a little bit more about something. Please by all means, let's make this a conversation. So on August 28th is the Prop 409 coming up very quickly now, and it's the permanent base adjustment election for Lake Havasu City. So we'll start off with a conversation, just some quick background on what is a permanent base adjustment. And essentially, it's a creation of a law that was created back in 1979, 1980, that restricts cities and towns the spending that cities and towns can have. It doesn't restrict the amount of revenues or funds that come into the city. It simply restricts the dollars that the city can spend, regardless of the dollars that come in. Since 1979, 77 out of 91 cities and towns in Arizona, about 85%, have addressed this issue in one form or fashion. There's two ways of doing it. One is through the permanent base adjustment, which we're talking about in Lake Havasu City's case. The other one is a home rule option, which is something that some communities have elected to do, where they go back to the voters every 4 years and ask for an increase in the limitation every 4 years. There are a number of ways that it gets kind of complicated in terms of what dollars can be spent by the city. Grant dollars, enterprise fund dollars, the dollars that come in for water, sewer funds, things like that. There's different credits that can take place that don't count towards the limitation. One of those things is also debt. Does not count towards that. So why it's a way for the city to expend dollars that the residents want as far as providing services. It's not always the most fiscally responsible way to do it, because when the city borrows money, it's at a cost. There's dollars that have to be paid by the city to accomplish that. A question that comes up countless times with regards to the permanent base adjustment is, how does this affect my taxes or the amount of dollars that I pay into the city each year? This Prop 409, or the permanent base adjustment, has no impact whatsoever on taxes or fees. So again, this is an issue with regards to how much funds the city can spend for city services. It has nothing to do with the amount of revenues that come into the city. So a yes vote does not increase taxes. Likewise, a no vote will not decrease taxes. They remain the same. I want to talk a little bit about, in terms of like the story of what's happened over the last 40 years since the law was first instituted. Back in 1978, when Lake Havasu City was incorporated, there were 0 parks. Today we enjoy, depends on how you classify, between 15 or 17 different parks throughout the community. So obviously there was dollars that were needed to construct these parks, and many additional dollars it takes to, as you're all well aware, to maintain these parks through staff and maintenance. Endless dollars that go into these facilities for the public's enjoyment. The Aquatic Center is something that didn't exist back in 1978. Again, a nice amenity that the community appreciates today. And these are dollars that the city spends to provide these type of services. Sewer infrastructure obviously didn't exist back in 1978. Water treatment plants is something that the city has constructed since that time frame. Prior to the construction of the water treatment plant, the city had some manganese problems. So I'm not sure those that go back a few decades in Lake Havasu City, but I've been told that manganese was an issue. It's a non-toxic. It's not harmful, but it literally looked like been told like a chocolate milk substance that would come out of your faucets from time to time, would stain your clothing, things like that. So the city runs and operates a very high-tech water treatment plant to remove all those manganese issues from the water supply. So paved roads and stoplights. Stoplights didn't exist back in '78. Animal control is a service that our residents appreciate. Things like we take for granted as far as jail services, and then of course the city and the region protecting our most valuable asset, which is the the lake itself and the lower Colorado River. A few pictures to just show the difference in timing. 1980, Lake Havasu City was just short of 16,000 population. Today we're right at or exceeding about, actually the number is probably a little closer to about 55,000 people with the census, the last figures coming from the census. Some of the details with regards to the August 28th election. A yes vote will allow the city to adjust its base. It'll move from $4.7 million base to a $9.7 million base, and this will allow the city to spend the dollars that it already collects. So it doesn't bring additional dollars into the city. It allows the city to draft and maintain and administer a budget based on the resources that are already coming in. And then a no vote does not allow the city to adjust its base, and the city will still collect the same amount of dollars, but those dollars will literally sit in an account, and the city is not able to spend those dollars and provide services to the community. Just some pictures again to show the difference in timing over the years. In 1980, with our police department, we had 24 employees, 7 fleet, and today that number is about 100 employees, and they ran almost 44,000 calls last year. In addition to these calls was about 2,500, I believe, off the top of my head, animal control calls that come into the city every year. This is the ballot language that looks like we had some adjustments this last year. We had some adjustments to this language just last week. So this is hot off the presses in terms of the language. We'll have to have one more final review by the Auditor General at the state level. We'll be coming back and approving this language. But as you see here, the top portion of the language talks about adjusting the expenditure base for Lake Havasu City by $5 million. A yes vote will have the ability to adjust that base, and the no vote will not allow Lake Havasu City to permanently adjust its base. Some pictures with the fire department and the difference where we're at 1980 compared to today, with the 4 stations versus 6 stations. And if you look at the annual calls, to me is the most dramatic. So we about 1,400 annual calls back in 1980, and today we're about 8,500 annual calls for fire and paramedic services from the residents. Some of the many city services that some of us, rightfully so, take for granted in the city. When we get up in the morning and take a shower and flush the toilet and brush our teeth, all these things we expect to work. We have countless hours and dollars that go in to provide these services to the community. We're doing a good job when these are seamless and when they don't become an issue for the residents. But you can see here, in addition to police and fire, courts, special events, all the recreation and park programs that as a board you're well aware of, the airport, water, wastewater, transit, animal control, code enforcement, and there's many more services that the city provides. Here's some fun pictures looking at the difference between what Rotary Park looked like back in 1980 compared to today, and also with London Bridge Beach, all the great amenities that we now provide to the residents that in the past were just a space for the public to congregate and to use. Today we provide services and maintain facilities in those locations. Quick slide on here. We're trying to capture the fact that if Proposition 409 does pass, the future budgets will be based on existing resources, existing dollars. So Prop 409 does not allow additional dollars to come into the city. So we will still maintain a fiscally conservative approach to our budgets, and we'll do what we can to make sure that we're providing efficient, constant, transparent services to the residents. Madam Chairman, Chairperson, and members of the board, that concludes my presentation. There's a website address on the bottom there from the city's website, and there's also some additional materials out there from the PAC, which is a completely different third-party group that is supporting Proposition 409. So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Knudsen. I'll turn it
Madam
over.
Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Keel.
So the city website mentions a publicity pamphlet that the city will put out.
Yes, sir.
And it also mentions that it's not available yet, but will show up on that page on the city website. Do you know when that will be available?
Yeah, it'll be available, where the timing of the publicity pamphlet will be sent out, mailed out to each registered voter and posted on the website at about the same approximate time that the ballot goes out. So that'll be right around August 1st or approximately 30 days prior to the primary election.
Thanks.
When the ballot language was drafted, did you have any kind of message testing done to see how that would play out?
Certainly, we're not trying to, as a city official and as the city as a whole, our role is to educate and not to advocate. So that's very important for us as city officials. So we tried to find some language that was we felt was straight down the middle, and allowing the residents to make a decision based on the information provided. We did do some research and with the ballot language that was presented to voters in other communities in Arizona. I think over the course of like the last 20 or 25 years, we looked at some ballot language that was used and tried to mimic some of that language. And again, hopefully we did a pretty good job of trying to stay as even keel as possible and provide as much information as possible and let the registered voters of Lake Havasu City make that decision.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Biasucci?
Thank you, Jess, for presentation. Appreciate that. My main question is, right now with the base adjustment being at, is it 4.7?
Yep, exactly.
Million? Okay.
4.7 million.
So have we had over the last few years any issues with us needing to spend money I know we have money. So what happens if there are times where we need to spend the money and we can't? What does the city do in that situation?
Well, so real numbers. So the city is over time because of the situation it's been over the last couple decades, has been able to build up some credits to allow the city to expend about $60 million in the general fund. So if Prop 409 would fail, that'd be a decrease of about $11 million in general fund dollars that the city would be able to spend. Again, the dollars would still be coming into the city, but it'd be about $11 million short of the $60 million general fund you see today. There's a couple different options. None of them are good. The short answer to your question is that the city would be unable to provide that service or provide those funds. Would have to make some really, really difficult decisions, and where cuts to services would have to take place. If the residents choose for the city to go in that direction. Other options would be to borrow dollars to take out debt. It's a very difficult decision to take one-time dollars that you would borrow as far as debt and then try to use those for ongoing expenses such as personnel or other things. It's just not a fiscally responsible thing to do. In addition, would be an example of where the city was at last year to pay down some of the public safety retirement service debt or obligations that I had on an annual basis. Borrowed about $12 million to make that payment. That cost the taxpayers of Lake Havasu City about $400,000. So there's some options there, not great ones. The penalty from the fine that comes from the state, if the city or whether it's Lake Havasu City or any city or town in Arizona would exceed the limitation, is you're penalized in state shared dollars that come from the state and distributed back to the cities and towns. The city would lose probably it'd be expected about $2.5 million the city would lose real dollars that would go to other cities and towns in Arizona. So there are some options. Yeah, so those are the options.
So when you said the situation where we had to take $12 million to pay for the was it the retirement system?
Yep, our public safety retirement system for police and fire. Yes.
Okay, so we had that money though, right?
Yep, had the money sitting in the bank.
But we had to borrow it.
Correct.
Okay. And the
Yeah.
400,000, what do you mean we lost 400,000?
So
just for fees.
the cost to borrow money at $12 million was $400,000. Even though that payment was immediately repaid, it was $400,000 essentially to provide that payment, our obligation as a city to pay down that liability, and that was the cost of the taxpayers to do that.
Wow. Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Thank you again for the presentation. other cities that have had this voted on, how, has there been a study as what way it's gone in most, or do we have an idea of how it's played out in other cities?
Sure. So there's been other cities that, again, about 85% of the cities have addressed it in some form or fashion. There's probably one example that gets pointed to quite a bit. 6 years or so ago, approximately time frame, city of Tucson, they go through a home rule election. Every 4 years, they go back to the voters to renew that limitation. And about 6 years ago, it failed. The voters decided not to pursue the home rule option. They came back the following year and reinstituted that home rule after some of the decreases in services that did occur. So does it happen? Sure, but for the most part, most cities and towns that take this to the ballot receive approval from the registered voters.
Questions on this side?
One more question, please. So will the voters have the opportunity to see what the current budget outlay is for expenditures over the next however many years without the passage of Prop 409 and with Prop 409?
Not really, because those are some of the decisions that would have to take place based on the results of that election. The budget that's been drafted and tentatively approved by council so far will still go into place regardless of the outcome of Prop 409, a yes or a no outcome there. Where the impact starts to take place is be July 1 of next year of 2019. So that fiscal year 1920 budget is where the impacts of the outcome of this election in August would take place. So again, you're probably looking at in the area of about $11 to $12 million in reductions from general fund dollars. The city would have to make some tough decisions where those services would be, how that would impact the services the city provides. We haven't made any decisions on what that would look like. We'll have to get to that point if the voters decide that's the direction the city needs to go in. If Prop 409 passes, then again, we'd have the same amount of revenues and resources the city has right now and the services the city provides right now. So that will look a lot like what the city does right now. Obviously, we'll go through a budget preparation time frame. We'll have the public involved. We'll have the council providing direction, and then staff will provide a draft budget next year that will be reflective of the existing resources that the city has.
Okay, so
Does that help? I know.
But aside from specific ways we would spend the money, will we see the difference in the expenditure limits? So we can see what our expenditure limit is now. Will we see that? Will we do, or maybe we already know it, what that expenditure limit will be?
Yeah, are you referring to sir, the difference between the $4.7 million, the base adjustment?
Yes, sir.
The Prop 409 is asking for a $5 million increase up to $9.7 million. So $4.7 million base limit right now equates to about a $59 million general fund budget. And that doubling the base limit from 4.7 to 9.7 would essentially do the same to the limitation. However, that does not mean that the city would expend those dollars. So what this does is set up the budget for the city over the course of the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years potentially, where the city could plan based on local process it does now to provide. So the base limit could be way up here, and the city will be adopting budgets down to this level for many years. So that's the intention of the difference between a base adjustment and the home rule is the base adjustment allows cities and towns to set themselves up for city services over the course of long periods of time. I think it was the town of Gilbert when they did their base adjustment was back in the 1980s, and that approval from the voters has allowed them to grow in the capacity that it has today, and they'll probably end up going back to the voters here probably within the next 5 years or so, I would guess. But it's provided the ability to grow from 1980 to today.
Thanks.
Does that help a little bit?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So maybe just along this, well, maybe a little bit on a different path, but starting with the same thought that Mr. Keogh shared. So when you're talking about, I mean, permanent base adjustment is meaningless to many
Sure.
people. And I really appreciated the nostalgia. I spent most of my childhood at Mudshark Beach. And then showing, where we're at now. It's an exciting time in the city, and we've grown tremendously. But that's not really the point. It's not we needing additional funding to support this exceptional growth. And so you can correct me at any point when if I get something wrong. The permanent base adjustment is to adjust an expenditure limit set based on our population.
Correct.
Is that correct so far?
Yeah, the base limit is adjusted each year based on small incremental changes each year based on population and growth factors.
Right.
Correct. But if a city grows faster than those incremental changes, that's where you run into issues like Havasu is right now.
And this may sound a little spicy, but the purpose of that limitation set decades ago was sort of out of some kind of distrust, I'm imagining, that cities couldn't financially secure enough to support their residents.
Yes, essentially,
Or
yes.
was there another
That's
purpose?
correct. There was some controversy that was occurring in California at the time, and some initiatives that took place there that essentially was trying to limit the amount of spending that cities and towns, their ability to spend dollars each and every year. So what they did in Arizona is they passed that initiative. Again, it didn't affect the amount of dollars that come in. It didn't impact the amount of taxes or fees that any city or town in Arizona could tax or subject their residents to, whether it's a small amount or a big amount. It simply went after the amount of dollars that the city spends for funding services. So it's a spending. It looks at from a spending perspective. It doesn't address the funding perspective. Okay. So, but yeah, at the time there was some distrust in California, and a lot of those conversations then took place in Arizona.
And I realize you have to walk a fine line, I suppose, as a city staff employee, and as a board, we can't take a position on anything. I don't think either. I think that there's a really quick and easy story to share there, in that our city has grown and has done a fabulous job, and it's our funds, it's our money that's being collected, and we elect leaders who can make good decisions on how to use those funds. And so I don't know what your pamphlet's going to look like, but if there's a short and simple route, like an option A and an option B, where everyone can get all of the details on one, and then it's a quick and easy on the other, that would be something that, as a resident, I would be able to hand out a little bit more easily.
Okay.
And
yeah, thank you. So again, that pamphlet comes out right about the 1st of August. So those that are registered to vote will receive that in the mail, a hard copy. There's also the ability to go view it off the city's website and obtain additional information. So, and just like other research that's been done here by other board members, the ability to go out and look at situations that have occurred in past years with other cities and towns, encourage you to do that. So, getting as much information as possible and educating yourself on the issue. That's really what my intent here is today, and really encourage all residents to do that.
So we have the city manager here. Do you have any other questions?
Mark Zeef here. Jess, thank you for your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I have a question. Not sure how to word it, but if the city divided into districts, would it be able to spend more money? Example, fire district. I guess I was told, in discussion, that we are all departments here and not districts, and
Correct.
The money is spent under one budget. Forgot who told me. I think we were at a Parks and Rec meeting when I heard the information, and that if it were to vote that the fire department went into its own district, it would potentially have its own budget to spend its own money. If something like that were to occur over time, would the city be able to spend more than that 4.7?
Let me answer your question this way.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's the right way to ask
Well,
the question.
first of all,
so.
you're correct. So the city is organized with departments, and all of the funds and services come out of the city's budget with all the different services that I alluded to earlier. So we don't have any districts in the city that provide services that you'd expect from a city. But more to your point, look no further than Bullhead City. So Bullhead City has never adjusted its permanent base. They've never gone out for home rule. They're one of the 15% of the cities in Arizona that have never addressed this issue. That's a large part because of they don't have a fire department. They have a fire district. So all those funds that are collected by the district and all the services that are provided by that district don't go towards the city's expenditure limitation.
Yeah, that answers a lot of questions for me. I was in discussion with the fire department about that too. I said, let's push forward. It's been 20 years. You haven't had your own district, especially after the fire that we saw at Body Beach this last season. It just, I think it would help. I don't think it would affect, the people's vote to change the base. I think that, should still be looked at, but it's neither here nor there. You're eventually going to cross that road every season of whether or not you could spend the money you have in the bank or not. So it's kind of not even on the same page as that, but I thought that'd be something good to look at.
No, it's great. In the end, it's about providing the best possible service to the residents, whether it's fire, police, or otherwise. So we're always looking at the best way to accomplish that. There's been no discussions in terms of a district. So the way it's functioning now has worked out real well for the residents. But in the end, the goal is to provide the best service we can. So.
Yep. And one more question: Would it be fire department district separate from police? Okay. So they would be two different districts with their own budgets.
It'd be its own governing board, its own taxing authority, would be totally isolated from any other function.
Okay, thank you.
I may have missed this. Did you provide information on how to contact the PAC for their information?
That's the way to do that is through Google or otherwise. So the PAC itself is a totally separate entity. I'm not involved with any of their activities. I don't attend any of their meetings. So the information that I see that comes from the PAC, I see it just like every other resident in the community by visiting their different pages or otherwise. So that's totally separate from what I do or what the city does.
Do you know what it's called?
What is it? This is not
Google
intentional.
Will tell me. It's fine.
It's what is it? 100% Havasu? Yeah, thank you. That's a good thing that I can't remember it. So.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion on this? And it is a public hearing. Anyone from the public like to speak? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, our next agenda item is direction of the board.
So at our last board meeting, it was asked if, and especially since our city manager is here, for a little bit more direction for the board moving forward, come into the coming year. So Jess and I have met and had some conversations, and I'll kind of turn this one back over to him.
Okay. Really here, I guess, some questions that come from the board and with regards to direction, how to move forward, how to advance, what's the role of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. So kind of here to have some of those discussions, but at the same time, it's certainly an evolving conversation to be had. So in short, I think what the role of any board or commission, whether it be for the planning and zoning or Parks and Recreation or any of the other wonderful boards that the city has, is similar to what the council provides, and that's a big picture visioning, giving Mike some big picture vision in terms of what to accomplish with regards to big flourishing parks or more activities or additional programs for certain age groups, things like that, and then allow him to go back and take a look at, conduct the research, look at the demographics, identify some different options and on how to advance that moving forward. So really, that's the role of the board here, is to provide some big picture recommendations and based on some of the comments and questions and all the interactions that you have as board members with members of the public. So we rely on you as passionate volunteers to have conversations with the residents, find out what's important to them, come back and provide some big picture direction back to Mike and Sherry and the staff, and then allow them to use their expertise and experience to run with it and come back with some great ideas. I think the improvements to the London Bridge Beach was an example of some of the things that can be accomplished, and was as far as bringing some of those additional amenities to the residents. And likewise, from Mike's perspective, his responsibility to you is to provide you with updates and information, make sure that you're as informed as possible with the facts and figures and statistics and demographics, and then to have those conversations to, in the end, provide better services to the community. So that's, in the end, that's it. So big picture, and allow Mike to be the expert in his field is what it's all about. I did want to talk about a few things too, or I guess one in particular. This year, the city has advanced, recommended, and the council is tentatively approved. The budget part of that is the CIP process. So this year's CIP, or capital investment program, is 100% funded. So every project you see within that the CIP is funded. It's an important step to make sure that when we communicate to our residents that this project next year is in the budget, that the residents, board members, the council members, others in the community can look at that and expect action to take place on that item, because it's programmed, it's funded, and it's been discussed extensively. Whether that's year 1, year 2, year 3, and then every year staff comes back to the council and we look at the CIP, and there's a process to make some adjustments, and then we move forward with the next 5-year CIP. I say all that to say this, that so that time frame is going to be in the fall. I'll get some exact dates and times. Mike will share all that with you, but there might be an opportunity for the board to be part of that process. If there's a recommended project that the board would vote on and identify as something that would be needed. Given this, that there is a limited amount of resources, when I talk about that everything in the CIP is fully funded, that means a lot of hard decisions have to take place in terms of what projects are more important than others, both for that particular year and then throughout that 5-year program. But I think it would be a nice thing to engage the board in some conversations about projects. The board would then, in my mind, would submit the project to the city, like the other departments and other entities would, and then it would go through that prioritization period to see if that's something that would interest the board, or advance a particular project or program. So that, I guess, in the end, that's really kind of the couple things that I came here kind of plan to present in terms of big picture vision, providing Mike and his staff with the direction to implement, and then maybe there's an opportunity to be part of that CIP process. So, but also here to answer any questions that you have.
I don't know if this is in the right place or not, but
Sure.
how's Sarah Park doing? I've heard that some of our funds went away.
So Sarah Park was originally communicated as a $20 million project. It was never in the CIP. It was never in any budget. It was never funded. So actually, this year's CIP shows a $2.75 million funding for one baseball field at that area with the different parking and amenities that would be there. And then the intention is to look at the improvements at Cypress Park, the 5 additional soccer fields, and then come back and take a look at where we're at and see if there's additional funding that should be provided for additional improvements at Sarah Park.
That isn't what we were told,
Okay.
all right? It was something like $15 million and 12 of it's being spent. It's all set. They're gonna fill in stuff and start building here real soon. I can't understand why we'd be told that if it's not true.
Okay. What's that? You're new. Oh yeah, I'm new. So I come in and I look at a CIP that's got more more projects than dollars. So it was coming in 3 months into the job, taking a look at a CIP, what we have as far as available resources, making sure that we're doing right by the residents in terms of identifying projects that can be completed based on existing resources. Wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy task to look at some of the things that were included and which ranked higher in priority than others. But we looked at a couple of different projects that, based on promises the city had provided in the past and expectations coming from the public, and try to include as many projects in that vein as we possibly could, given the amount of resources, a $26-27 million CIP funding for next year. That's the projects that were on that list.
And Sarah Park was not on, excuse me, Sarah Park was not on that list?
The CIP that's been tentatively adopted by council includes Sarah Park improvements to the tune of $2.75 million, which would include the design and construction of a ball field at that location.
A singular ball field?
That's correct.
That isn't that's not close to what was presented to us.
Okay.
Somebody's playing with stuff.
I think that the Sarah Park plan itself, people went through city went through and the residents went through a fields analysis, identified certain projects and amenities that the community wanted, went through the effort of identifying a really cool design of what that would look like, and obviously the construction of Cypress Park, and then the design of Sarah Park. I'm not here telling you that Sarah Park would never be constructed in how it was messaged to you, it sounds like, in the past. I'm telling you right now that the CIP includes $2.75 million towards that project, and we can take a look at what we would need to do to get to the full build out of that project, if that's what the residents and council and the community wants to see at that location.
Mr. Knudsen, I realize the agenda topic is direction of board. I do think this falls under it in some
Sure.
ways. And my ears perked up when you said that the CIP projects were 100% funded, because I
Yeah.
was also thinking, great, Sarah Park is good to go. It was presented when we analyzed the assessment of the fields and went through a very lengthy process when Mr. Mark Frostley, thank you, when Mr. Frostley was leading us. And there was a phase 1 and phase 2 as part of that approach for Sarah Park, and that both in phase 1 they would also do all of the grading so that phase 2 could be incorporated. Cypress Park was sort of an interim, although it's fabulous and wonderful, and I think it's great, so I don't want it to sound like I don't. But that was presented to us, and I believe to City Council as an interim gap filler, so that once Sarah Park is developed, there would be all of the fields necessary as identified in that assessment. So in terms of the direction of the board, I think it is kind of highlighting something where maybe this was brought up as a discussion point, that there is a lot of work that goes on. We read all of the documents and we have discussion with the public, and we do ultimately pass on recommendations through our staff. And so hearing back on that, and even if there are changes, and maybe we can have further discussion and revise recommendations based on that. That's my opinion. Did anyone want to add to or ask any other questions on this? I noticed during the last council meeting there was some discussion on some concerns with filling vacancies in other departments, and I don't know if that's an issue this year with Parks and Rec. I do think that Parks and Recreation is a great tool to use in terms of recruiting qualified folks. I think that when people are looking at cities that they want to move to, they look at the economic possibilities, and they look at what their family life would be here, and that's Parks and Recreation. So that's one of the reasons I'm on this board. And then also our education system, which is separate from the city. So maybe that could be something that the Parks and Recreation Board can be more involved with moving forward, if that continues to be a problem with the city.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, I
Thanks,
just want to
Susie.
concur with what you said. I think that's in agreement with what you were explaining to us this fall. We can get with Mike and do our proposed ideas as that new CIP comes in, and we can extend it to the, existing budget. That's good. And then, Yeah,
I guess I would encourage you, with Mike, it'd be very helpful, and it'd also be very helpful as part of that CIP process if that was a collaborative, collective decision, rather than one member of the board saying one idea and another one saying another idea, that, a recommendation, a formal recommendation by vote, I think would make a lot of sense, so.
cool.
And beyond the CIP too, I think the budget discussion as a whole, because I think CIP includes other departments, not just for parks, right? Okay.
Right.
Okay,
Suzie.
and I just wanted to say, not to do with anything that we just discussed with Parks, but I've had a blast on the board. I enjoy working with everybody, and I just want to commemorate Mike or congratulate him. He's been a joy to work with. He's my go-to guy on all my issues. He's my yes man and my no man, and he shuts me down and builds me up, and it's really great to be able to work with him, bring him all my ideas from the people, and have his expertise. And I really appreciate all your help, Mike, and a great job you've been doing. Thanks.
That's great to hear.
I agree. Other discussion? Councilwoman? Well, thank you. Oh, it's a public hearing. Would anyone like to speak on this topic? I did. Ms. Van Roy.
I'm Mary Van Roy, and I wasn't coming here to speak, but now I think I have an opportunity to also say that Parks and Rec Advisory Board is very valuable, and it's really important that you guys continue, and that the staff, Mike and Sherry, are wonderful to work with. As a Trails Committee subcommittee at one time, we were very fortunate to have the MPO step in, and they have done a fantastic job for bike, pedestrian, trails, and all that. So that's how it worked for us, and that worked out very well. Now that you brought up about the changes at Sarah Park that we didn't know about, I guess I'm going to ask you, in the budget, is a state parks land at Body Beach and that to be covered now? Is that some of the, because that was our Piccadilly Point and that continuation to Contact Point. So I'm just curious now that the subject has come up.
I can briefly
Thank you.
discuss it. I want to caution that we're getting off the agenda itself and getting into the budget itself. But yes, there's some dollars identified for that area. Yep. Be happy to answer more that question with more detail after the meeting.
Well, actually, I don't know if this falls in line with the FY 18-19 CIP budget, which is our next agenda topic. So you might get your question answered today.
Okay. So on June 12th, City Council adopted the CIP and the tentative 2018-2019 budget. Tomorrow night, City Council will be asked to adopt the final 2018-2019 budget. I've had several conversations with a few of you regarding the CIP and especially the Sarah Park expansion. I think Jess kind of covered that, but I want to just kind of reiterate that the CIP program for the next year was put together under several guidelines, including staying under the state mandated expenditure limitation and not increasing the operations and maintenance budget for 2018-2019. With that being said, Sarah Park remains a topic of important discussion throughout the city with all our city leaders moving forward. I don't want anyone to feel that this project is completely off the table or forgotten. It's definitely, we talk about it quite often in our meetings. We just have a few additional hurdles to get through. And I do believe that, Cypress was a wonderful gateway. And I will continue to push for, the final build out at Sarah Park. Is that going to take a little longer than I think we were initially thinking? Certainly will. In that CIP, there are a couple of projects that do affect the parks. One of them will be, there are some dollars identified for the area near Piccadilly Point. We're also negotiating with the state whether or not it would make more sense to just extend that lease or to actually purchase that property. So some of those conversations are still ongoing, but there are some dollars identified in the CIP for that area. And then another project, well, actually two more big projects will be upgrading and building a few new restrooms throughout both Rotary Park and London Bridge Beach. Those bathrooms are very old. They do not handle a lot of flow, especially on our busy weekends. Therefore, we're renting a lot of porta potties to put out there, closing the restrooms themselves because they just can't handle the volume that are now the traffic that's in those parks. So that'll be a very important project coming up, as well as then we will finally hook into the city's effluent for watering Rotary Park and London Bridge Beach. I'm sorry, just Rotary Park at this point. But that will allow quite a savings of water and be able to reuse the effluent to water that park. So those are a couple of the CIP items that are in the next couple years in that project. With that, I'll take any questions.
Just to clarify, is this topic with the CIP/budget, is that considering the whole budget, everything? Program and projects?
Yes, everything
Okay,
will be
I just wanna make sure.
approved tomorrow night, and I feel very comfortable with the budget that we did build operationally for programs. That everything will be able to be covered, as well as I know it's important for this board to relook at teen break and what that truly looks like. And I do feel comfortable with the amount of money that's in the budget that we'll be able to do something there.
Thank you. Okay, questions? Mr. Knudsen. Oh,
Okay, to respond? Okay, no, we're in the question was with regards to Buddy Beach. So right now that's owned by the State Land Department, and the city has a lease on that property. The city has expended dollars to put improvements onto the state land piece. So we built a parking lot, the large parking lot that's directly east of the ball fields, 4 ball fields, as well as the parking lot for the skate park, all sits on that state land piece. So it's important for the city to protect the improvements and the dollars that it's spent in that area. However, the city does not have the ability to just go write a check and purchase that land. State land mandates through their charter that any lands that they sell go to the highest bidder. So we have identified some dollars in the CIP for the possible purchase of that land if it does go to auction, and we would hopefully be able to that our budgeted funds would equal the sale of that property. So yes, we do have some dollars in there. Mr. Keene alluded to the fact that maybe we'd look at that in terms of a longer lease period with the way the market is out there right now. So maybe that's an option. But then you also just at the same time you feel uneasy about leasing property from state land when you have so many improvements on that piece. And it'd be nice to have some of those unknowns, far more determined than they are today. So yeah, but there are some dollars. I think 1.8 or 9 million dollars for the possible purchase of that Body Beach area is in the CIP. So.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Will there be, I think the process is there's a tentative or there's a budget, like a first review of the budget, and then the final is tomorrow night, the final adoption of the budget.
Correct.
Were there any changes made for Parks and Rec from 2 weeks ago to now?
There have not been for our department.
Okay. Is there anything that concerns you?
Parks and recreational wise, no.
Okay. Let me ask a different way. Were there any Parks and Recreation related activities or projects that weren't able to be included in the budget that we would have liked to have? That we've discussed?
I don't believe so. I mean, yes, as I can sit here and say I want to see Sarah Park completely built out as well, and as a professional in that in this field, that's what we would like to see. I also have the understanding that right now it's not. We have a few hurdles to get through. So in regards to that, yes, is there certainly more things we'd like to see in the budget? Yes, but I believe every department has those same, or has similar desires that they need in their department too. So I feel very comfortable with the budget that was presented.
Okay. And are all your staffing levels maintained? And
yes, we actually had no reduction on our staff at all.
Those were my questions. Councilwoman.
Jess, can you answer a question? If 409 does pass, does that push forward the Sarah Park project any further than where we're at now?
Short answer is no. Prop 409, if passes, allows the city to maintain service levels at existing levels. If Prop 409 fails, then not only does that project not move forward, but we'll have an additional $11 million in reductions to the city's budget. So, no, Prop 409, if passed, does not provide any additional funding to the city. So, but if Prop 409 does fail, then it limits the amount of money that we can spend as a city.
Jess, so basically what we're saying, if Sarah Park was to be built out, we may not have the funds to maintain or the manpower due to the 409 not passing?
So we're having a couple different conversations. So yes, but it's important to kind of separate the two. So if Prop 409 wasn't out there, we'd be talking about, what the resources that the city has and trying to prioritize different projects. So where does Sarah Park list in terms of community needs, wants, and desires? How does that relate to public safety, police cars? How does it relate to roads and transportation? All the different things that the city provides as services are all kind of lumped into one big budget, and we got to kind of figure out where are our priorities for that existing year. So the right answer from Mike, anytime you ask him, are you happy with the budget? He's going to say, yeah, I'd love to do more things. All the departments, all the residents, we'd love to have as many resources and services as we can possibly have, but we only have a certain amount of resources and dollars to fund those services. So we can come back and take a look at where Sarah Park is prioritized in future years with relation to other projects. So Prop 409, if you put that back into the conversation, if it passes, then we move forward in the similar fashion that we are right now. If it fails, then that means that it's a reduction in the services that the city provides, so in addition to the other conversation.
Is the CIP budget determined year to year based on projects that have come up, or do you have a budget and then you see what you can fit in there? Which one comes first?
So the both happen simultaneously. So the CIP budget is it does contain projects that require one-time dollars. So construction of a park, capital project, like Cypress Park, you spend $4 million and you build the fields and the amenities and purchase the land, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the operational budget. When you identify a project in the CIP, now you got to identify about a couple $100,000 for maintenance to keep that grass as green as it is and provide the services, be able to empty the trash cans, maintain the restrooms and all those dollars that are there. So those things kind of happen simultaneously. So a project in the CIP is going to also have an impact on our operations. As far as how that is created, it happens about the same time in the fall. That's why I talked about that window of opportunity for the CIP projects that maybe the board wants to provide a recommendation. But that same time, so get right around the November time period, we'll different departments, boards, citizens, council members, other economic development organizations in the city will also be providing different recommendations for different projects to include in the CIP. And at that point, then those projects are rated based on what we know from the residents and what makes the most sense. Kind of a piece of a puzzle. So if you have X amount of dollars and you have different projects, they got to identify based on priority, but also the ones that can fit into that puzzle, so that we're spending dollars for projects based on the amount of money that the city currently has available. Does that kind of help a little bit?
Yes, it
Okay.
does. Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Zeef.
I'm going to take a chance. I don't know if I'm supposed to ask this question. Can the city park lease land?
Can the city lease land?
City parks?
So the city parks department,
Yeah.
any department within the city itself, we can lease land, but
Okay.
you have to make that on a case-by-case basis, make a determination if that's the most wise use of resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I think we've gone down some questions like that, down that road before, where even if we're identifying additional revenue sources, the fact is that we still can't spend beyond the limitation, right? Or the base, I'm not sure
Mhm.
which one comes
Both are
first.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Anything else? Have anything else? Okay. It's a public hearing. Did you have any other questions or comments? That's okay. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. We are to our future agenda items already. And I believe this is my last meeting as chair, so I would be expecting to see elections on the next agenda.
We're not sure it's going to be your last as chair, but yes, nominations and the election will happen on our next our next board meeting.
I think I've been on for 2 years, so I think I'm automatically kicked out of the seat.
You've been on for 2?
I think so.
No, I don't think so. Just one.
All right.
I'm keeping count.
Okay. Okay, other agenda items.
I'd like to Mark here, I'd like to discuss suntan lotion dispensers at the Little Beach Playgrounds, Rotary in London. For people who forget their suntan lotion from burning, it's something we could discuss maybe. It would be along the lines of concessions, lockers, suntan dispensers, suntan lotion dispensers. And once again, I want to push to reopen the conversation, if nobody minds, about the channel rope lights. The channel rope lights sample test. We never really got with that. We've got plenty of time to discuss it, if that's all right with the board. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Others? I know it seems far out, but the teen break discussion, especially since we're losing our youth member, finding some way to involve the teens that will be participating in that and having some discussion about what we can make that look like. Okay. That's it? Okay, I guess that's it. And the next meeting?
July 23rd.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? You can stay here. Thank you.